You walk into a room and instantly feel something is off. No one says anything. Nothing obvious happens, but you notice it. The tone, the silence, the way someone hesitates before speaking. And most of the time, you're right, and you don't always know why. You didn't learn that, you adapted to it. At some point, your environment forced you to pay attention, and once that happens, it doesn't stop. Psychology calls this traumatic intelligence, and there's a reason you have it. Some people move through the world differently. Not loudly, not obviously, but differently. They notice things others don't. They read situations before anyone has spoken. They understand people at a depth that sometimes surprises even the people being understood. And when things fall apart around them, when pressure arrives, when the situation becomes difficult, something in them goes quiet and focused instead of scattered and overwhelmed. From the outside, this looks like a natural gift, something they were simply born with. But developmental psychology tells a different story, because this kind of perception, this combination of emotional sensitivity, pattern recognition, and calm under pressure, doesn't come from comfortable environments. It doesn't develop in stability. It develops in the spaces where stability was missing, where reading people wasn't optional, where paying attention to subtle signals wasn't curiosity. It was how you stayed safe. Researchers have started calling this traumatic intelligence. Not a clinical diagnosis, not a label for what was lost, a description of what was built, quietly, without intention, inside conditions most people will never experience. This video is about that intelligence, what it looks like, how it works, and what it means to carry something this precise without ever being told what it actually is. Think about someone you know who always seems to notice things others miss. They walk into a room and something in them shifts. Not anxiety, not excitement, just attention. They sense tension before anyone says a word. They read what people mean without needing an explanation. And from the outside, it looks like a gift. Something natural. Something they were born with. But that's not quite right, because psychologically, something else is happening. Trauma doesn't only leave damage. In many cases, it creates adaptation. Research shows that when someone grows up in unpredictable environments, their brain learns to detect subtle changes in behavior, emotion, and intention. The brain becomes faster at reading patterns. Systems like the amygdala become more sensitive. The result is a kind of perception that most people never fully develop, not by choice, but because at some point, paying attention was the only way to stay safe. One of the first things you start noticing is how quickly you read a room. You don't wait for people to explain themselves. You already feel what's happening before anything is said. You notice the shift in someone's tone, the pause before they answer, the small changes most people ignore, and you trust it, even when you can't explain it, not because it's intuition, but because your brain learned to recognize patterns early. Another thing you start noticing is how deeply you pick up on other people. You can tell when something is wrong, even when they say they're fine. You feel the weight behind their words, sometimes even before they do. And that can be exhausting, because you're not just hearing people, you're processing them. You might also notice that when things go wrong, you don't panic the way others do. Something in you goes quiet, focused. You assess, you adapt, While others freeze, you move, not because you're fearless, but because pressure isn't new to you. And over time, you start thinking about people differently. You analyze behavior. You replay conversations. You try to understand what's underneath the surface, not out of curiosity, but because at some point, understanding people mattered. And when you put all of this together, the awareness, the sensitivity, the pattern recognition, it starts to look less like a flaw and more like something else. And this is where most people get it wrong. They think this is a flaw, something to fix, but it's not. This is your brain doing exactly what it learned to do. It learned to notice early, to respond faster, to stay ahead, not as a weakness, but as protection. And over time, that protection became perception. You can't turn this off. Your brain learned it to survive. But you can learn to use it, because not every situation is a threat. Not every silence means something is wrong. Not every shift is danger. The system doesn't disappear, but it starts to work differently. Less like defense, more like choice. This wasn't random. You didn't choose what built this, but it built something real. Your awareness, your perception, the way you understand people. And now, what you do with it is up to you. So, this was never about what happened to you. It was about what you became because of it. The perception, the pattern recognition, the ability to read what's underneath the surface of things, the calm that arrives when everything else is falling apart. These didn't come from nowhere. They came from somewhere specific, from conditions that required them, from an environment that, without asking your permission, trained you to become exceptionally good at surviving it. That is not a small thing, and it is not the whole thing either, because the intelligence that pain built was never meant to be the final destination. It was the adaptation, the response, the thing the mind became when it had no other choice. What you do with it now, how you direct it, how you use it, how you let it serve you rather than exhaust you. That is where the story continues. The intelligence was built without your consent. Everything that comes next is yours. To continue this understanding, watch the next video here. And to understand human behavior at a deeper level, subscribe to Decoded Way.